The purpose of this show is to guide you to realign with habits that get you to live the life you've always dreamed of. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast with Jesse Ewing. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle, where you can access your full potential right now. Finally break free from destructive habits. That dream life, if you want it, you can have it. This is where you transform your health, mind, business, and relationships. Or do nothing and keep your life the way it is. But if you're ready for change, you're in the right place. This is where you're gonna learn how to live a habit-based lifestyle. You are tuning in to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Jesse Ewing. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle. Let's go.
And I wanted to jump on here today and just talk about an experience I had a couple weeks ago. Actually, it was a couple months ago, but I kind of wrote about it in my journal a few weeks ago. But I had a client a couple months ago give me some feedback that I push people too hard. And if you guys pay attention to the title of this episode is, do you let people dictate how you show up in life or business? And if you're listening to this, this is really going to be about sometimes we can let people dictate how we show up in life or business based off of what they say to us, based off of, reactions we can get. And even for me, coaching and training for 21 years, there's times where people have given me, feedback that really kind of like made me want to change the way that I showed up as a coach, as a trainer. And there's other times where they gave me feedback where it kind of reinforced what I was doing. But I think the important thing is with feedback on the other side, that's what it is. It's just feedback. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be your truth. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to take it. But what I always think is feedback on either side is constructive. The biggest thing you can take away from that is just understanding that feedback is exactly that. It's feedback. But some feedback I got a couple of months ago from a client was they said that, hey, Jesse, you push people too hard. And when I first heard it, I remember feeling bad about it. And I sat there for a second. I'm like, wow, that really hurt because I take my job very serious. But I can tell you that the biggest thing is I wanted to really shrink and immediately change my coaching style as I was getting this feedback. I'm like, man, maybe I should, not push people so hard. Maybe, I should just give people a more watered down version of me and let them get away with kind of whatever they wanted. And I remember sitting there kind of as I got off a call and heard this, was like, man, I really let it affect me for a few days. And I thought about, I thought about people who maybe had left my program or stopped working with me because, maybe I pushed them too hard. And I really let it affect me for a few days until, one morning I kind of sat in prayer and I'm like praying and I'm listening to God's voice. And he literally says, like, listen, I gave you a gift to see in others what they cannot see in themselves. As I sat there and heard that voice, I'm like, man, that's right. And so part of that is I got to help people break free of old patterns, old behaviors, and old stories. But sometimes what happens is people are not ready for it. Then they feel like they're being pushed into this place. And what I always say is like, we're always going to be pushed into decision of either choosing to break the pattern, choosing to break the behavior, choosing to break the story, or which is really uncomfortable, especially if you're not ready. Even if you are ready for it and you want it, it's still uncomfortable, or choosing comfort and going back to kind of our old pattern, our old behaviors, and our old stories. But in that requires a collision. And typically, the way that I like to coach is I like to have, we could call it a collision or just have kind of a place where someone's backed into a corner and they're really forced to make the decision and choose what they want. And I can tell you a lot of times, people aren't ready. They're going to fight back. They're going to resist the change. They're going to resist changing their patterns, changing their behaviors, and changing their stories. And they're going to be upset because of that. And they're going to look at you and they're going to want to blame you or tell you that, hey, your coaching is, it's too hard. It's too direct, and you try to get people to do things they don't want to do. And I'm like that. That's exactly the type of coaching that I bring to the table. And that is my gift in that. And there's a discernment that comes with that. But sometimes, people may not feel like they're ready. And I get both sides of it because I've been there too. In that, you can have people talk behind your back. And for me, even as a coach, I've had people do that. And even this specific person even did it, even to people inside of our coaching program. But that's not my problem. That's their problem. The thing that I have to kind of go back to is, well, what is the truth of it? Is like, listen, God gave me this gift. And if I'm not accessing it or using it with people, then I'm really hiding it. And the tendency is when we're faced with someone who may not like the way we do something or may not like the way we coach, we can want to change to be more like they want us to. But I think in this place, even for me, man, I had to really go back to, well, what is God's truth that he spoke so many times and so many times over and over in coaching and training people in 20 years, the consistent theme is, whether I was training people in fitness, nutrition, even doing some marriage coaching with my wife for a while, or even in business, really like what the constant thing is I help people do is access things inside themselves they never thought were possible. Well, part of that is that, they can't do that unless they break free of old patterns, old stories, and old behaviors, and even old thoughts. These are things that I feel like I've had to do myself. And these are things that I felt like this is where I really lead other people. And yes, I could sit there and say, yeah, I coach them in fitness, I coach them in nutrition, but really that's just the tool of delivery. But having, hundreds of conversations, tens of thousands of conversations about this is, you get to watch lives completely transform, families changed. I don't ever want to take the credit in that because I really believe that messiness, even in my own life has become the mission of what I get to do. And I don't want to take credit for it because, I want to be able to give that to God because God is the one who gives you the gifts. And these are things that he gave me. And so, I think it's a reminder that maybe you're listening to this and maybe someone you've had speak out to you that, hey, maybe you coach them too hard, or maybe you're too hard on them, or you push them too hard, or maybe they feel like, you're not doing enough of this thing. But I think the important thing is for us, and even for me, it's a reminder that's like, hey, God didn't create me to shrink in that moment. He created me to stand out. He created me to be bold, even if other people can't handle that. And I think there's a tendency we have to play small in that place because other people may not be able to handle that. But I also believe that having someone speak that over to you allows you to lean back into the truth of God, and for me, it's doing a mirror check and just going back to the mirror and reminding the man in the mirror, myself, whose I am. And when I look at the mirror, I know the truth that's staring back at me. I know what, the mission is, what my purpose is. And my purpose is to, remind myself that, hey, God's given me these gifts, using them on a day-to-day basis, even if that means at some point, somebody may not be ready or somebody may not be able to handle that. I'm still going to leverage that and access that. And I think there's two key things in this. Number one is we have to remind ourselves, whose we are. Again, we have to also remind ourselves the gifts that God has given us. And even if someone else, just imagine if, you gave someone a gift, but it wasn't what they wanted or it wasn't what they were ready for, does that make you feel bad about the gift that you have? And I think in this moment is we have to remind ourselves that we have a gift. And if we don't give it to other people, or we don't have a habit of giving in that, then we can end up playing small and really shrinking in that place and not accessing those things. And so I think it's an important reminder to access your gifts, to leverage them, as strengths in your life, but also no matter who can't handle that or who might speak against that, is we still have to step out in faith and boldness with those. So I want to thank you guys for being on here. This is a short one today, but wanted to drop this inside the group because I feel like there's a lot of business owners inside the habit-based lifestyle community who could end up, playing small because someone else may have said something like this, or may have made someone feel small for really trying to improve their life by giving them a gift. But maybe at that point in time, that person's not ready. But regardless, you have to continue to move forward. You have to continue to access your gifts, and you have to actually step out in faith and continue to use those.
The purpose of this show is to guide you to realign with habits that get you to live the life you've always dreamed of. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast with Jesse